a good plan with this, but we have our general manager who moved to Arizona as we were talking last time, and so
Yeah.
we're just trying to squeeze her out and try to get as much knowledge out of her with the incoming person who's going to be working with us full time. But she seems to be hoarding like information, and not wanting to train people and keep saying to the new people, hey, just go on Sparks and watch the videos. And I'm like, yeah, that's supplementary. And then you can, but you can do the main training. And she's very hesitant. I don't know why, but I think she sees what's coming. But that's the challenge that I've been having. And I think after uh, a couple weeks of training the new person who's going to be working with us full time, I'll probably let her go. Right, Grandmaster Smith? But yeah, that's my challenge.
Well, uh, let me address a couple of principles in that, and it leads into my first topic anyway. Um, the principle number one is I've never found it productive to have the outgoing person train the incoming person, and so I would just not do that and not
Okay.
ever do that. And most of the time, having the outgoing person linger on staff, and letting it linger. I mean, this was back in when we had the meeting in Phoenix, but having them kind of slowly linger, slowly bittersweet fade away is not very productive either, right? One, I think it was me. No matter what the level of relationship was with this lady on the way out, pretty much the minute she said she's going to move to Phoenix, it would have been, oh, okay, great. Well, we'll figure out your replacement. Have a little chat about. Oh, wait a minute. I am in charge of letting people into the room apparently, and there's a whole bunch of people waiting. So for everybody waiting, I apologize that you were there, even though you can't hear me yet. There we go. There we go. Um, But so Sal, that I think is number one. I mean, in almost all cases, if it were me, pretty much when she says she's moving to Phoenix, it would have been a little bit of debrief, figure out what's going on, and I mean from you, not you from her, not anybody else. And then I would have said, when are you leaving? Okay, fine. Let me pay you for the month, and you're going to have your hands full getting ready to move. So go get ready to move. Um, and I've never been. I know that some people are. I've never been a fan of let's have a party, let's have a sad farewell, let's announce it in all the classes. I tend not to do that. There's kind of you know a little note that goes around of let's celebrate so and so moving to Arizona on the next leg of their life, and she's been a great contribution, and then they're gone, right? I much prefer that's kind of the way it goes. Does that make sense, so? I don't know if he's still there or not, but if you are, you're muted. Anyway, so I think that's number one. Number two is having the outgoing person train the incoming person always seems kind of foobar to me. Um, in part, the outgoing person, for whatever reason they're going, um, oftentimes are not at their peak of enthusiasm for the organization. They're not at their most excited point. Oftentimes they've already faded for about 3 or 4 months. Maybe that you've noticed, maybe that you haven't noticed. And so I see a lot of times, by the time somebody actually says, in this case, I'm going to move to Phoenix, and she was saying she wanted to work from there, but once somebody says that, oftentimes their psychological disposition and their level of contribution and their level of engagement has faded pretty significantly over that time. Again, I prefer very nicely, to not have a long fade away, but to you know, I mean, if somebody gives me 6 weeks notice, in most cases I'm going to pay them for 6 weeks, but within the week or within 48 hours or something, there, I'm giving them the opportunity to prepare for their next leg of their journey, and helping fund it a little bit along the way. By letting them focus on that, if you know what I mean. I mean that, and that's the language you use. There's no reason for it to be belligerent or anything, but there's no reason for them to hang around. Matt Smith, do you have a different opinion on the let's have a going away party and celebrate and recognize and all of that stuff?
Well, I think it's usually depend on the circumstances around them leaving. If they leave, it's they, they're if it's a married couple, husband got transferred to another area and you have to go, um, health reasons, family or things like that. When they leave disgruntled, obviously nothing like that. But if they leave on good terms, and I usually like to have them maybe co-train the new person coming in, as that person is just shadowing them for a couple of weeks before they leave. But in this case, when Sal talked to me about it, there was also things that she was doing that, from what I understood, was he wasn't sure how to do. And she was doing a lot of counting and payroll stuff and things like that. And I said, well, you've got to make sure that you know how to do that, or somebody knows how to do that before you cut her completely loose. So my suggestion was to slowly, give her enough hours to do that, but then cut that down quickly over the next 30 to 60 days or so. So it doesn't necessarily have to be cut her off all at once.
Yeah, and I guess that's the point. 2 points at which, I mean, we're not opposite ends of the spectrum, but I'm a little bit less enthusiastic about than you are. Is one, having them train the outgoing, the incoming person, especially I mean, it's one thing if you have a bookkeeper, but it's something else completely different. You have a program director, head instructor, somebody who's actually engaged in the students, and
She
often,
was doing bookkeeping too. That was one of the issues too.
right, right.
Well,
Well,
and
okay.
I agree with you guys as far as her training the new incoming person. I would, I mean, she's very resistant and hesitant to want to train, like all across the board. All the ladies, front desk ladies, are like, yeah, she didn't really want to train us. She didn't like training us, and she would just basically say, hey, I'll do that, I'll do that, I'll do that. So she would never really train people
Well,
across the boards. That's what it was.
yeah, keep in mind there's two issues buried in there, Sal. Issue number one is having somebody who, perhaps isn't terribly competent in the job, but number two, specifically, they're mentally already checked out, trying to get them to get the next level to be better than they are. That almost never happens, right? I mean, yeah, I mean, think of it in the movies. I mean, every now and then you have, what was that Kevin Costner baseball movie where the old pro was training the new bucks coming up? Every now and then you get somebody who's in that mindset, but it's really rare. Most humans, once they've checked out, they're just kind of doing the minimum to get by, right? And I understand there's another dynamic of her thinking she's going to be program director from Arizona, but I don't know how that works. I mean, if you have somebody part time doing some level of administrative stuff, fine. But there's very little in the school that is remote work that you can't farm out to a professional, right? So if she's doing the books, just hire a bookkeeper. Get a good CPA firm that has a bookkeeper.
I've already done that. I have a
Yeah,
CPA and bookkeeper. I've already
yeah,
done it.
yeah. Well, and again, Sal, we're talking about for everybody's benefit, right? Um, Matt Smith said something, and let's circle back to that. It's a big mistake to ever have anybody on your staff who knows stuff that you're not able to replicate. Um, and there's a whole series of things. Use an example. Lee Meltier had a situation where she had a full timer who in Lee's analysis, was jealous of Lee's success and was pissy that, and Lee was paying her, well for the position, but was pissed off that Lee was living in a, a beachside mansion in her estimation, and wearing a Rolex and driving a Lexus and so forth. And basically, quit, but sabotaged everything on the way out. She sabotaged her website. She locked it all up. She destroyed records. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff that this person managed to destroy on the way out. And so you've got to be extremely aware of. Ultimately, you've got to be the person who set it up and have master access to things. I'll give you a different direct martial arts example. Is a former staff member of mine went to Phoenix and opened a chain of schools, and then he had a person sitting at the front desk who was handling bookkeeping and working the front desk and so forth. And she knew the password to the credit card machine on the front desk. And so what she was doing is every day or every couple of days, I forget the frequency, she was going and swiping her debit card after entering the password and then running a credit. In other words, running a refund. And what that does in effect is it pulls money out of your checking account and puts it in their checking account. And by the time he figured it out, she had pulled out about $150,000 out of the account. And so, I don't recommend building a lot of systems, that get crazy about fraud. I mean, I see people who overly inventory all the T-shirts, because they're pissed off the program director is going to steal a T-shirt. If I do anything like that, I just assume, all the staff members are going to take 3 or 4, and I'm going to just give it to them and get it over with, and not spend any time worrying about it. So you can certainly put too much time and effort into creating systems to protect you against the rare instances. But on the other hand, you don't want it to be where, this one person is the only one who knows how to log into your website, or this one person has the only access to QuickBooks, or this one person, has a series of access and passwords and stuff that you don't have. And by the way, the other common syndrome is when you have somebody in that kind of role. It's totally common for the person leaves, and then you suddenly discover that 90 days worth of contracts weren't entered for billing, or some other thing just as egregious. But once they've checked out, that an awful lot of stuff starts to fall through the cracks, and it's just much better to usher them on. And again, in this case, Sal, I don't think it's a good idea either to kind of string them along. Somebody says I'm moving to Phoenix, but I'd like to keep working from there. You can certainly go through a list of things that somebody could do and say, well, I have this, and this that could be done remote, and all these other things can't be done remote. And so, if you want to work hourly, that's fine. Or if you want me to pay, $200-300 a month, that's fine. But, once the conversation comes up, I would make it explicit on what the next step is. And again, I tend to, when are you leaving? Well, you're going to have a lot of work to do. Why don't we just do this? I'll pay you for the next month and a half. Thank you for giving us notice, and let's just make it end of the week, and we'll go from there. And again, I never, Matt Smith has a tendency to assume everybody has ill intent until proven otherwise. I always assume everybody has good intent until proven otherwise. But you don't want to ever be put in a situation where within your company you have one person who can lock you out of your bookkeeping, lock you out of the billing system, lock you out of the website, who can maliciously do something like that. Somebody who's in control of your Facebook business page. You can go through the list. And nowadays there's a long list of that kind of stuff that if you don't ultimately know what the master control is and have the administrative authority to shut them out, shut them down, and one thing or another, things can go sideways pretty quickly. Does that help a little bit, Sal?
Yeah, could I add just one thing to that?
Of course.
Yeah, I think for everybody, and especially since it's staff development training, the idea is that the training comes from the systems that we have in the school too. And I would never have a staff member train another staff member in how they do it. And even the terminology, well, the way I do it is X. The way I do it is this. I eliminate that from their vernacular. They're not allowed to say things that way. Well, even how they teach. Well, the way I do it is this. It's the way we do it at the school, the way we do it. There's a big difference in that way of doing it. So somebody that's an outbound, and I caught the tail end of that. I'm sorry I was late, but somebody that's an outbound person that would train an inbound, somebody else, it's possible that could happen, but it would be to train them on, here's the script and here's the document that we have, or here's the video, and they're going to walk them through it and they're going to role play the way we do it and the way we do it in the company. There's only the way we do it in the company. It's not the way Greg Moody does it. It's the way in my company we do it. Karate Built Martial Arts, we have this way of doing it. And it may seem I'm really being anal about it, but I am, because it's the way we do it, not the way I do it. Well, the way I do it is this, because then if it's the way I do it, then the other person could be the way I do it. Now we've got the telephone game about our staff training.
Yeah. Well, let me give an example, since Matt Smith and I at least are movie buffs. Everybody remember that Michael Keaton movie where he cloned himself?
Yeah.
And he kept cloning himself. To me, the outgoing person training the new person is like that movie, where every successive generation gets dumber and dumber and dumber and dumber and dumber, right? What you see that happens is, again, I mean, Sal, take your flying career, and you know a million times more about the process than I do, but there's a centralized training hub. There's people who are specifically capable and expert at the training process. There's specific systems. There's books, checklists, and all that kind of stuff. You wouldn't put somebody out in the field and say, that guy's going to train you to show you what he does. I mean, that just isn't the way these things work. Now, once they're out in the field, getting clued in by other people is fine. The other thing, and I may be reading into this more than exists, but think of the institutional knowledge of depth of information and knowledge about each of the individual students is when setting up systems. Oftentimes people worry about inventory, hand pads, uniforms, all that stuff. Well, that stuff in the scheme of things is relatively worthless. If you're doing $1 million, $2 million a year, the only thing that matters is the students, right? That's your inventory that's important. When we did that Disney event one year, when we had Mike McCoy there, he was talking. I don't know if it was public or private. He said, well, yeah, Disney's interesting because the only thing they really care about is the tickets getting in the front gate. He said, if you're working at the concession stand and you give away, 10 free Cokes because the kid was crying or one thing or another, they don't care. They don't inventory it. They don't care. They're not paying attention. They don't worry about it. But nobody's getting in the front gate without a ticket. And that tells you what their focus was. Their focus was attendance. And it wasn't the little nickel and diming stuff otherwise, and they assumed there was going to be some slippage, and they encouraged the staff to give away some stuff just for a happier experience. But all the way along the line, you've got to be maintaining, organizing, and systematizing that organizational knowledge. Now, what I mean by that is, let's think of some systems that I've talked about over the past couple of years. We would always take all the schools and take their billing report, and once a month we would go through every name on the report. So we would ABC mom, ABC dad, ABC the kid, look at whether they're active, inactive, ABC. Now, what I could do is I could say to the program director, go take the report and go through that, but it's not the way it worked. Everybody as a team went through every name. Why did everybody on the team go through every name? If one of the staff members got hit by a bus tomorrow, everybody else has the same level of knowledge or a similar level of knowledge because it's been discussed frequently, right? I talk about the school ID cards. And what I'll see some people do, which I think is a mistake, is each class, they'll mark the cards, they'll mark them into the computer, whatever the hell they do, and then they'll refile them right away. Well, I never allowed that to happen. I had a box on my desk, and as soon as the instructor was done with it, they had to be in the program director's desk to figure out what needed to be done with that. And then there's interaction between the program director and the instructor. But at the end of the class, they were right there on the desk, and there was a stack at the end of the night. Why was there a stack at the end of the night? Because nobody left until we had a recap. And the recap was going to include organizing the stats for the day. Here's the appointments we had, how many intros, how many were actually on the floor, here's the calls we had, here's the lead appointments we made, etc. How much cash do we do, all that kind of stuff. But the other thing that was going to happen is there was going to be a quick review of every student who came in. Now, some of it's pretty quick. I have a brown belt kid who's got 130 stripes on his belt, and he comes 4 times a week, and the parents volunteer to do everything. I probably don't have to spend much time on that one. But I've got a new white belt who's come in the last 4 weeks 3 times. We have to have a conversation about that. What are we going to do to, fix the attendance? Did anybody have a conversation tonight? What's our follow-up step? And there's an action step, right? But either way, we're doing at the minimum kind of that ABC, what's going on with the kid, where are they at on attendance, where are we at on getting the renewal finalized, where are we at on summer attendance and so forth. But again, that's not one person. That's not, here's 15 minutes for the instructor to sit down and go through the students. This is program director, instructor, if you have 3 full-time people, everybody who's full-time. If you have 2 or 3 part-timers on staff that night, almost all cases, if they worked the last class anyway, they're staying there, and we're going through all that stuff, right? So we're looking at where are they at on their testing, what conversations that we have, and so forth. So now, if one of the full-timers has suddenly absented themselves, everybody has that institutional knowledge about each of the students, right? And I'm not dependent upon Bill or Sue, who got hit by a bus and can't do it, or has checked out already, has decided they're going somewhere else, to share that with everybody, because in most cases, just human nature is they're not going to be 100% on top of the game and 100% focused on communicating that and so forth. That's not attributing malice. It's just, once you're checked out, you're checked out. You're on to something else, right? So keep in mind what I'm talking about is the institutional knowledge in the school is to have as many, and Paul, this is an important thing with 2 schools, is the more institutional knowledge you get across the 2 locations. So, that's one reason you don't have a meeting with one school, you have a meeting with the other school, you have everybody together. You have them training together, you're going through the students together, you're going through especially the advanced students and what's going on there. Everybody's looking at each other's numbers. I used to do every Friday an instructor rotation. So when I had 5 or 6 schools, everybody would, rotate clockwise. And then the next week they'd rotate clockwise again. And I would send instructors around to all the other schools, mostly because I wanted them to see what everybody else was doing and get some ideas, but mostly just because I wanted them to be familiar with all the schools and all the schools to be familiar with them and get engagement that way. And again, what do we have? A few multi-school owners on here. I was always fairly regularly, and I don't mean with every 6 months, but I was always free to pop staff back and forth between different schools. And there is a point at which sometimes just leaving somebody at the same place forever, and it turns a little bit too much into home and a little bit too much into excess comfort, it can be problematic. I think sometimes shaking things up, and usually what I would shake up is you'd have 2 or 3 people together that for some reason or another they weren't clicking as a team well. Oftentimes it was they loved each other, they were going out and getting beer. I mean, I don't mean romantically, but they were, had fun together. They went out and had beers together, one thing or another, but they weren't prodding each other on for higher performance. And oftentimes by separating that dynamic, it's just like in high school. You get 2 people who are C students together and they produce a D student. You get 2 A students together and they stay A students. And if you put an A plus student with a B student, oftentimes the B student will come up to be an A student. So there's always that dynamic to look for too. Is that making sense for everybody? So, the first takeaway is, I think, your most valuable inventory, institutional knowledge, the most valuable knowledge that everybody has to have is an intimate knowledge of each and every student and their likes, their dislikes, their training patterns, as much information as possible. And to the extent that you can develop, and I freely admit I was never very good at this. When we tried to use software, I couldn't get the staff regulated day to enter it. Our biggest fallback was the ID cards, where we could take notes and so forth that was okay for the students to see, and then just oral tradition of sharing the stuff. But the more you can have, and again, that's why I like, carrying around like these bound notebooks, is you can take notes on everything, and to some extent you have something to look back on, and on the other extent it just anchors it in so you remember it. But the more that you have methodologies to document, to record, to keep track of that without it getting complicated, the better off you are. Is that making sense to everybody? The next piece of that, and it kind of goes back to where Sal was, but it transitions into our next step, is Master Moody said it pretty well, but let me say it from a different angle. You want to be really good at every important process in the school, to have an outline, to have a script, to have a way we do things here. And anytime a staff member starts saying, well, the way I do it is, that means they're not following the system, right? And it's again, you wouldn't have a green belt, saying, well, the way I do this form is blank. Well, no, I mean, the form is done the way form is supposed to be done. The move is done the way the move is supposed to be done. There's not a great deal of personality involved with getting that to happen. So that's point number one. But point number two is, if you're going to have everything systematized, you've got to have everything fairly simple at the same time. So I've walked into schools and they say, oh, we have everything scripted, and they have a book of 500 pages. And then they say, well, everybody has to follow the script verbatim. Well, I guarantee, and I've done this, but you can take any one of the staff members and they don't know 80% of what's in the notebook, right? You've got to have it be, and again, the way I like to phrase it is, if you showed up at their house at 2 a.m. with an air horn, woke them the hell up and said, ring, ring, they could do an info call, about 3/4 still asleep. If you said, let's sit down and do an enrollment conference, they could get through it pretty smoothly. And anything else that's important in the school, it's got to be that second nature, right? So as Master Moody was saying, all of those things, they have to be simplified, outlined, a specific process. And on the other side, think of it as, it's just like putting together a Broadway play, right? Again, I've never produced a Broadway play, but the way I understand it, everybody with a speaking part at least gets the script, and they memorize the script, and then they start, rehearsing with the other people, and then they do pre-opening shows for a month or so. That's not even, they haven't even opened yet, but it's basically people will come and pay to watch them practice over and over again before they actually go live. And that's what you want. You want this constant drill and rehearse and practice to the point that they just can't not do it right. Who was it? There was I screw up sports analyses, metaphors all the time, but I think it was Larry Bird. There was some famous story from years ago, and they took, I'm going to guess it was Larry Bird from memory, and they were trying to shoot a TV commercial, and he's supposed to jump and shoot the ball and miss. And if I remember the story, they had to do something like 30 takes before he missed a shot, because it was so ingrained in muscle memory to do it right that getting him to do it wrong was nearly impossible. That's the way you want every important process in your school to be. And what I see a lot of owners or managers do is they'll walk into the school and be pissed off that things aren't being done the way they're supposed to be done. But when you walk in the school and you're pissed off that it's not being done the way it's supposed to be done, the question is how long was it not done properly before you caught it? And how thoroughly ingrained was it for the people to do it right? And 8 times out of 10, when there's things that aren't being done the way they should be done, it's not that people are trying to sabotage the system, again, unless they're on their way out and they're checked out. It's that, you thought they were trained and they didn't really know what specifically they're supposed to do or how they were supposed to do it. And then, within a month or two, I mean, we've all had this experience. All of a sudden, they're embarrassed to ask, right? If somebody goes 3 months through without any correction, and they're doing it wrong, and maybe they figure out they're doing it wrong, they're embarrassed to ask even, right? So you want to make sure that it's simple, that it's easy to train, and they're thoroughly trained in all of that. So I want to move on, but any questions on any of that so far? We've hit a number of subjects, but the primary thing here is simple, easy to organize and script systems, having them memorize it to the point that 3 a.m. when they're groggy, they can do it perfectly, and then inspecting what you expect. So the first way is when you're training, they watch you do it, they have it scripted, you watch them do it, you make sure they're doing it in any system, whether it's ID cards or the way they run the class. You walk them through, you have them do it with your support, you correct anything that's wrong, you have them do it with support for a while, and then you gradually phase off the support. But what we do also know, by the way, on that is the quote I inaccurately attributed to Hawking, but all systems left to their own device tend towards entropy. Is, again, if you don't retrain them on everything every 90 days, it all goes to shit too. So you've got to make it simple, clearly scripted, train thoroughly, and then keep retraining on everything you expect them to do over and over and over again. And I think we all tend to think, they got it, I don't have to do that anymore. And as soon as they've got it, you don't have to do anything anymore. 6 months later, they're kind of like that fifth clone with Michael Keaton, where everything's gotten dumber and dumber and dumber and sloppier and sloppier and sloppier, and it keeps evolving.
Well, I think in a way, though, sir, that I would say that's a good example, but it's a bad example. What happens is the fifth clone at least stayed the same. In this case, they degenerate.
Right.
I mean, I think so. In that clone example, the metaphor doesn't hold up in the sense that what I noticed is, and it's happened to me many times where I've thought, and I'm a stickler for repeating the training on an 8-week cycle, and I repeat the training, and you guys have heard you guys have seen my schedule for that. But there's a few things maybe I didn't repeat in the cycle, and then I assumed they had it right, and then I found out otherwise, and I was just aghast that maybe they didn't answer the phone correctly or certain.
Didn't you learn it? Didn't you learn in high school? Never assume makes an ass of you and me. Didn't you?
Right. Yeah, that was from The Odd Couple a long time ago.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, the first time that came up was I think ass got said on TV.
I love it.
Yeah. It's look at the video on The Odd Couple. That's pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, and somebody goes up in one of my staff meetings and I think they've got it down perfect. And I say, okay, show everybody how to do that. And it doesn't, it is wrong and dramatically wrong. And if you don't do the training, I guarantee they're doing it wrong. That's the easiest assumption to make. If you're not consistently doing training on a rotating basis, you can guarantee it's wrong. If you're not repeating, the phone script is a good one. It's one of my pet peeves. I guarantee they're doing it wrong.
And by the way, having it mystery shopped as much as possible as well.
That's part of the training.
Yeah.
That's part of the training. That's part of what you do. When you call your school and you're not there and they answer, they shouldn't answer, my guys know not to answer, oh, hey, Master Moody, they'll answer the way they're supposed to answer. And sometimes I